I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the BYD Atto 3, a new electric vehicle that's about to launch here in Australia in July 2022, and BYD want to sell 18,000 of these Atto 3s per year in our market. For reference, that's 50% more cars than the Tesla Model 3 sold all of last year. Ambitious? Yeah, you're right, it's ambitious. And in today's video, we're going to go through everything you need to know about the BYD Atto 3. We're going to talk about charging it, how much range it's got, the battery sizes available, the interior features, the packaging and the practicality, and lastly, how you can buy an Atto 3. Because if you haven't heard of this vehicle, if BYD gets their way, you're going to be seeing them pretty much everywhere. What is it? Well, it's a 4.4 metre long vehicle that's broadly equivalent in size to something like an MG ZS EV. But as we'll see in today's video, this one high-spec Atto 3, known as the Superior overseas, is a significantly higher spec car than something like that MG, and yet it costs 45 grand drive away if you're in Tasmania. The prices are slightly variable from state to state. Here in New South Wales and also in Victoria, it's about 47 grand drive away, and then you can get a rebate here for around $4,300, taking it down to about 42. So a relatively affordable vehicle, as we'll see, for the sort of stuff that you get on this car. We're going to be taking a critical eye to the features that you're going to get on the Atto 3. We'll be driving it in a few months' time here on Australian roads and assessing the suspension tune, which has actually got Australian priorities fed into it, we're told, so that'll be interesting. But the basics of the vehicle, 150 kilowatts, 310 newton meters from the front motor, so it's front wheel drive, 320 or 420 kilometers of range from a choice of 50 or 60 kilowatt hour lithium ion phosphate blade batteries, BYD's own battery technology that they make themselves. It's about 3 grand more for the big battery in this car. So that 45 to 47 grand price, that's for the 50 kilowatt hour battery. So we're going to start with range, charging and battery size. Then we'll have a look at some of the styling and design of the vehicle. We'll jump inside, have a look in the back seat, and then I'm going to let you know how you can buy one if you like the vehicle. So before we get started, hit subscribe down below. Before we get into the design, the shape, the packaging and the interior of the Atto 3, let's cover off one of the most important basics of any electric car. How much range has it got? Well, the answer to that is that there's two variants here in Australia, a standard range battery, which is about 50 kilowatt hours, and an extended range battery, which is about 60 kilowatt hours. And WLTP, which is a fairly accurate way to measure range, is either 320 kilometers or 420 kilometers on this vehicle. So we have a charge port cover here on the front right wing of the vehicle, and underneath there for the Australia spec cars, you're going to find the ability to AC and DC charge, DC through Type 2 charging. Maximum charge speed is only 80 kilowatts DC for this vehicle, which is some way off the likes of the Hyundai Ioniq 5, for instance, which can charge at about 220, 230 kilowatts. But of course, that vehicle costs a lot more than the BYD Atto 3, and it's line ball with price rivals like the MG ZS EV. Now, you're going to be charging through this 80 kilowatt DC charge port if you're on a road trip or something like that with the Atto 3, and charging at 80 kilowatts is going to take you about 90 minutes. So this certainly isn't an ultra rapid charging EV, but BYD tell us that the feedback they're getting is that the vast majority of owners are going to be charging this thing overnight in their garage, either just through a typical 3-pin wall socket, which would take you about 30 hours, so not all that practical, or more likely through a wall box installation. A 7 kilowatt wall box is going to take you about 9 or 10 hours to charge this vehicle, whereas a proper 3-phase wall box, if you want to invest that far, you can charge the Atto 3 at 11 kilowatts, and that's going to take you more like 6 hours, making recharging the vehicle at your home or office probably the more convenient choice. Now, interestingly, the Blade battery, which is BYD's own battery technology, which they build themselves, that's a lithium iron phosphate battery. It's not a lithium ion battery like a bunch of others on the market. It has no nickel, it has no cobalt, and BYD tell us that they don't need any of those raw materials, so it's better for the environment, it has fewer raw materials than lithium ion, it's more recyclable, and they tell us that degradation is incredibly minimal on this vehicle. I've been told today that BYD engineers expect this vehicle's battery to be able to get to 1 million kilometers with minimal degradation, though the battery warranty in Australia is only 7 years, 160,000 kilometers. So that's a look at the range and the charging of the Atto 3, but how big actually is it? Because in photos, I find it's a little bit difficult to tell what size the Atto 3 is. Well, it's 4,455 mils long, similar in size to a ZS EV, a Mazda CX-30, or something like a Skoda Karoq. But as you can see, up next to me at 6 foot, it's quite a tall vehicle. It's definitely an SUV rather than a hatchback. Really long wheelbase, 2.7 metre long wheelbase, which is huge. A combustion car could never, basically. We've got 18s on this car, black aero wheels, 55 series tyres, Chinese brand of tyre on this car, but the Australian arm, or EV Direct here in Australia, are hoping to be able to specify it with Continental tyres, which would definitely be of assistance to the dynamics. Moving around the back, certainly a polarizing feature is the Build Your Dreams written logo. That's 100% staying, confirmed by me today. The brand says they know it's a little bit corny, but hey, it's memorable and they think it means something. So there you go. LED lighting around the back of the car, LED headlights at the front, and you can really ignore these badges in Chinese script because the car is going to be regionalized for Australia. Of course, no exhaust, being a full from the ground up EV, and quite a clean design. White is a standard color, grey and blue will attract a $700 premium. Now, being top spec only in Australia, known as the Superior overseas, we do have a power tailgate and a full width LED light bar. That opens up to reveal just over 430 litres of space, nice and deep, dual height boot floor, just space for charging paraphernalia, no spare wheel in this car. Little net off to one side, little net off to the right side as well, and a sturdy cargo cover and controls here on the back to close the boot or close it and lock the vehicle as well. And the paint finish actually looks quite nice, very metallic on this vehicle, and having a peep there at the standard panoramic roof. Now we're going to jump under that panoramic roof and have a look at the really interesting interior on this vehicle. I don't think it's going to be like anything you've seen before. Right, so welcome to the cabin of the Atto 3, a vehicle where if BYD gets their way, you're going to be seeing these everywhere. You might even have ordered one already. Drop me a note in the comments below if you've done so, because I'd be very, very keen to hear from you. Now, to keep things simple, to keep early production a little bit more convenient and get supply going quickly, this is the only interior that you're going to be able to get. As I mentioned, outside the vehicle, you can have blue, you can have grey, or you can have the free colour, which is white. But every single Atto 3 for Australia, for now, is going to be fitted with this fascinating interior colourway, which is like an ocean blue, a cream, and it's got red detailing. So I think it's fair to say there's quite a lot going on, but there's actually method to the madness. So I've been told today that this interior theme is about athleticism of the human body, and it's about youthfulness at any age, BYD tells us. So that's all getting a little bit esoteric and philosophical, but basically the trim here on the dashboard, that's meant to look like a muscle, which is why it kind of has the sinew running through it. The center console here, which is ribbed, that's meant to look like a treadmill. And these interesting vents down here for the climate control, they're meant to look like dumbbells at the gym. So, you know, at least it's unique, right? We often jump into Chinese-made cars and say, oh, right, well, I can tell they pulled that indicator stalk from a Golf or that sunroof thing from a, Toyota Corolla. It's very difficult to say that about the BYD Atto 3. This vehicle has its own thing going. Maybe you would say this small digital driver's display is a bit like that on Volkswagen's MEB cars like the ID3, and perhaps you could say that the center screen is slightly reminiscent of that in a Tesla Model 3, but I would say to you, can a Model 3 screen do this? No, it can't. We have one of the most interesting implementations of a screen in a car I've ever seen in 8 years of road testing, and that's the ability to rotate it from landscape to vertical at the touch of a button, either on the steering wheel or here on the screen. The reason BYD have done that to this screen, which measures in at 12.8 inches, is because some apps work better in landscape and some work better in portrait. For instance, this car has inbuilt TikTok, which you'd want to watch in portrait. It only works when the car is stopped. I would also add to that I like navigation in portrait. That's why I like the Volvo screen, the Polestar screen, the Subaru Outback screen. You can navigate easier with a portrait screen, but then a lot of apps, including media, all work better in landscape, and you have that option with this screen, which I think is fantastic, and you can let me know down below what you reckon. Now, this car is never going to get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. BYD don't love them, and instead they're investing in their own software, which is what's running here. They call it D-Link, D-I-L-I-N-K. It's just, it's an infotainment system of its own, but it's quite an impressive one. It sort of looks Android-based to me. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but it kind of has like full-scale apps running on it. It's also linked up to a Dirac stereo, not a brand I'd heard of before, but having listened to it in this car, and if you're a subscriber, you'll know I'm a stereo snob, I can't avoid it. It sounds good. The acoustic in this vehicle sounds good, the stereo sounds really good, and of course you've got Bluetooth streaming of media from your phone. You also have, up here, an integrated dash cam, which a lot of owners are going to love. It loops every 30 seconds. You can set it to start recording every single time you drive off in the vehicle, and it saves to a little memory card down below this center console here. So a lot of people are going to love that. This car only has a forward-facing dash cam, but future BYD models are also going to have rear and side dash cams too. Center console here, it's all designed to be like a regular car, BYD tells us, including the direction shifter for the single speed reduction gear. You've got drive, you've got reverse. This one is sort of moving around a little bit. Quality seems not too bad, I would actually say. This is a production standard vehicle from China. This isn't pre-production. There's a bit of flex in some of the plastic in the door. Have a go of that screen, eh? It's actually pretty nicely tacked on, I must say. Lots of soft touch plastics. This might be vinyl, but they say the seats are a mix of leather and artificial leather, which is cool. Now, if I go into the climate controls, I don't immediately see an option for heated seats, but it is possible they might make it to the final spec of Australian car. We'll endeavour to find out. But we do have a power driver's seat, just 6-way, so no under thigh angle, 4-way power passenger seat in this vehicle. Some really cool detailing, like playing a musical instrument, like sort of guitar strings for the door bins, which I quite like. Wireless charging here, storage beneath the center console, variable height cup holders, massive bin between the seats as well. So it's different, it's distinct, quality seems okay, the seat feels reasonably comfortable, the stereo is good. Looking forward to actually getting it out on the road to seeing how it all comes together. All right, that's the front. Let's check out the back seat. Jumping into the back of the Atto 3, you immediately see the benefit of the 2.7 meter long wheelbase. This thing might be sized like a CX-30 or vehicles like a Toyota Corolla, but I have more than ample legroom. I'm 6 foot. This seat is perhaps a little bit further back than I would normally have it, and I've got several inches of legroom. Headroom beneath the panoramic sunroof, which is standard, I've got enough, and tow room, I actually have heaps. Now there's a completely flat floor here above the Blade battery, and while you can tell that we're in a skateboard EV because my feet are sort of sitting a little bit higher than the seat base, it's not the worst I have experienced. It's better than the Kia EV6 I was driving the other day for rear seat comfort, I would say, and you could get someone in the middle if you had to, although the seat does come up a little bit in a bit of a perch. We have rear air vents, which is great to see. We've got rear USB ports. The back of the front seats are really nicely finished. I got to give it credit. It certainly comes across pretty strong, this vehicle. And then we even have things like soft touch rear doors, which you certainly don't get in a CX-30. So that's quite nice. Flip down armrest here. We've got 2 cup holders there. And I think it just gives me a moment to reflect that for similar pricing to an MG ZS EV, this is virtually semi-premium from first impressions, whereas that car isn't. So looking forward to a proper road test soon of the BYD Atto 3. Last thing we'll do before we wrap up today's video is to talk about how you can buy one. Okay, so if you like the look of this EV, what can you do about it? Well, unlike a lot of cars which are very, very supply constrained at the moment, as I already mentioned, somehow they've managed to get a dedicated Australia and New Zealand production line going in China for this vehicle. So there's 1,500 a month that are up for grabs for largely Australian buyers. BYD have already ordered cars, the full allocation, 1,500 times 3, 4,500 cars for the first 3 months. They've already been ordered. Now, most of them are spoken for, the brand tells us, but they have admitted there is still quite a bit of free stock available in that number of vehicles. So you order them online. I've already mentioned the pricing varies a bit state by state, but let's call it kind of mid to high 40s drive away, and then you can apply for your rebates depending on where you live in Australia. You do that through EV Direct's website, but they've also got a partnership in the works with Eagers Automotive. That isn't complete yet. Quite a few other publications are reporting that's complete. It actually isn't. It's still in the works, but if that gets up, you'll also be able to purchase a BYD Atto 3 through Eagers dealerships. They've got a bunch of dealerships in Australian cities. Here in Sydney, they have dealers on the Northern Beaches, Sutherland, Liverpool, so dotted all around the city basically. In terms of servicing and maintenance, that's actually going to be done through what used to be called Kmart Tire and Auto and is now called My Car. So that's where you're going to be able to take the Atto 3 for the relatively limited maintenance this full EV needs. Things like cabin air filters, brake fluid changes, and safety inspections and tires. That'll all be done through My Car, which is, I guess, pretty convenient for a lot of people. And the warranty, as I mentioned, 7 years, 160,000 Ks for the battery, 7 years unlimited Ks for the vehicle. So really going after the likes of Kia and MG and even Tesla. So that's a first look at the BYD Atto 3 right here on Australian soil. Now this thing should be a groundbreaking EV. The pricing is certainly approachable. As we saw inside the vehicle, it's got a bunch of premium features and the range ain't bad, particularly if you go for the extended range battery, which does cost a few grand more, but still leaves this vehicle in pretty good terrain in terms of value for money. So for me, it's all gonna come down to the driving. Because one of the things which is reassuring about mainstream EVs, the Tesla Model 3, the Kia EV6 or Niro, the Hyundai Kona Electric and Ioniq 5, is the driving dynamics are sorted. That wasn't something that we found in the MG ZS EV. An unrelated vehicle, but yet there's still ground to be proven with Chinese cars here in Australia in terms of being able to cope with very, very tough Australian road surfaces. I've got high hopes for this thing, but it's all going to come down to a road test. Let me know your thoughts down below the video. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.